So we're now recording, and a recording of this session will be available in a couple days at mopag.net, our website. Some of you may not be getting the emails that we put out to our MOPAG members. It's our list server. I'll make sure that some of you that have been, some of the people that have been joining recently get added to that email list. Let me admit one more person here. So I'd like to share a screen of the we're not going to do that right now because it's not there. Let's go ahead and do the open up with the treasurer report by Christina Anderson.
Okay, we had 2 membership payments within this last month, and our new total in the bank account is $1,203.16. And I did contact LUAC, the website that you can also donate on, to see if we could have an automatic bank deposit, and they don't do it at this time. So I'll keep an eye out on that.
Okay, thanks, Christina. Let me try and show the agenda here. So today we have Bailey Netsch, if I'm saying that right, the Communications Director at Missouri Democratic Party. And she's going to talk to us about democratic messaging. And she'll be followed by Ross Hunt, who's also going to give a little presentation along those lines about what Democrats can do with rural voters. Then Representative Bridget Walsh-Moore will talk about what's going on in the Missouri House this session. And then we should have time at the end to have an open discussion about whatever people want to, such as the elections coming up and other things. So are there any announcements that people would like to make? If not, I'd like to run down a few things that people might be interested in. Excuse me. So, as I mentioned, on April 5th, we have the municipal elections coming up in St. Louis County. And I'd like to hold any discussion on that until the end of our meeting. I've sent out an email on Show Me Integrity. They've joined, I think you know Benjamin Singer, his group Show Me Integrity. They've joined with Conservatives Against Corruption to defend the ballot initiative that's under attack. And again, you can go to the email that I sent out at MOPAG. I've also in the chat sent out a link to Show Me Integrity if you want to find out more about that. Thirdly, just in case you missed it, Deb Lavender is running for state rep in the 98th district. That's a swing district. Currently Trish Gunby's district. So I didn't have her site posted in the chat, but when you get an opportunity, I think you ought to go to her site and donate or volunteer if you're inclined. She's always been a big supporter of our group efforts and has always participated in keeping us up to date and speaking at our events. Earth Day is coming up on April 23rd and the 24th at the Muni Grounds in Forest Park. Citizens Climate Lobby and the Missouri Coalition for the Environment will have booths there, and I posted a link for that in the chat. The last thing I had listed is an email that you should be getting tomorrow in MOPAG. And again, I've posted that in the chat. What you're looking at is the Heartland Alliance for Progress. Anybody ever hear of them before?
No, but I don't see anything in the chat. Is it just me?
Um,
No, I don't see anything.
sorry. I'll resolve that in a bit. I'm not sure why that's not. I have to go back and figure out why that's not right. But anyway, so there's on March 28th at 7 p.m. they're going to have a Zoom meeting to meet the progressive candidates running for the Missouri House. So those are some of the many, many things going on. I'll get that resolved for you so you can get to that chat, those chat links. Okay, so I invited Bailey Netsch, if that's correct.
Close enough.
Pronunciation. As the communications director at Missouri Democratic Party, because I think we're all interested in knowing what the Missouri Democratic Party is doing to communicate and what we can do to help. And some people have already been involved in that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bailey.
Okay. Hi, guys. Oh, okay. There we go. Hi, I'm Bailey. Yes, my last name is Netsch. Rarely does it get pronounced right, so it's all good. And it's also changing in a month and a half, so no one really needs to learn it. It's okay. But so I have just a couple slides for you guys today. Talk a little bit about spring messaging. Obviously, a lot of that was talked about in the State of the Union, so I'll kind of pumped about that still. And then focus specifically on LTEs and op-eds. And then from there, if you guys have any questions. So I will see here if Steve, it will let me share my screen. You might have to, oh, no, it's letting me, we're good. Okay. All right. So can you guys see it?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So let me start it. Why is this? Sorry, my mouse is like not moving with it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's not the first page. That's cool. Okay, so quickly on, well, not quickly, this is kind of the exciting part. So for spring messaging, first thing I want to say is messaging is always changing, always. There are different kinds of messaging though. You know, we have proactive messaging, reactive messaging, and active messaging. So all of those entail different things. But the topics that the White House, the DNC, and then also just what me, Randy, and I have kind of discussed, looked at different polls and whatnot based off what we're hearing from you guys. And the main thing that we are really going to be pushing is the unity agenda. So if you guys remember that from the State of the Union address, that is fighting the opioid crisis, mental health, veterans health, and ending cancer. So obviously all of those are super great, but they aren't normal policy type things. So normally that's not something we would really focus on, but just literally repeating those words, unity agenda. And then if you talk about those four things, but then go into the other policies, and it just suddenly those policies are also part of the unity agenda. Whoops. So you're kind of just giving this general feel of he has this unity agenda, and that's just giving you a lead in to a discussion about their bigger agenda options. The word unity is kind of your catch to get people. The second main one that we're working with is Made in America. Obviously, that's very important to Mr. Long. So we're going to play with that a little bit. So this Made in America saying covers both the economic growth, the amazing job numbers that we saw yesterday, and also instills a patriotic response, which I think definitely the Republicans have beat us with the last, whatever, how many years. For, patriotic means scary guys with big flags in their pickup trucks. But now we're trying to change that up a little bit. And then the third thing is Ukrainian aid. Regardless of who would be president during something like this, there's going to be criticism about what we or Biden are not doing. The Republicans are liking right now to explaining how we aren't doing enough. And thankfully, the American people have, really decided that this is an important thing to them, that helping the Ukrainian people is important. And so giving them details about actual aid that we're sending is going to be very important. Biden mentioned $1 billion in direct aid, which in my opinion, that's not even enough detail. Like, that doesn't tell me anything. And so we are going to be going further into that, specifically with the Ukrainian aid. And then if you notice, I have a couple more over here we'll talk about, but these are more statewide, so I didn't feel like I needed to really break them down. So the fourth one I have is infrastructure attacks. And the reason I have that in quotations is just because I don't like to think that I'm attacking someone, number one. And also that means to some degree that it's violent, which it's not. But so our main focus for hitting the Republican representatives and senator singular is to go at them for voting against the infrastructure bill. Now, that's tough because one of our representatives also voted against the infrastructure. So that's something that I have to walk the line on quite a bit before I post something like, oh, wait. And so this is kind of a different messaging for Missouri specifically than to other states. But what we've done is break it down to representatives. We have Facebook ads that are kind of starting to roll out right now. Each of the 6 GOP representatives have kind of like their own. So I did not do any graphics that were strictly GOP or Republicans voted against, because that just gives, whoever, Joe Schmo on Twitter, that's a real quick reply of, hey, Cori Bush didn't either. But if I'm posting, just Hartzler or or just so-and-so, the focus is more on the person and not the party. So I included that as one of the talking points because, one, it's the attack in quotations that we'll be focused on, but also because we do kind of have a hard thing with that, with having one of our representatives voting against it as well. Fifth one, GOP interfighting, that more at like a state level. National, federal wise, I don't really see much of a point in that, to be honest. But I think playing on the obvious divide between the governor and the Senate and the House is something that we should definitely be talking up right now. I don't know if you guys, hopefully you do follow our social media and our newsletters and such. Before I got here, I was at the Arizona legislature. And so it is one of my very big goals, and definitely have been already this session, to get more detailed content about what's happening at the House and the Senate into our stuff, so that we also can be a resource for you guys in that manner as well. So if you notice on our social media and on the newsletters, like, I will discuss legislative stuff quite a bit. We have some good calls between us and their team, so it's good. And then the last thing, candidates, obviously. That is more of that's one of the things that is, pretty constantly changing because that is definitely a active and reactive messaging setup. But in the spring, what our kind of focus is simply getting them out there, introducing them. We had our first town hall in Joplin last weekend, and it was super great. We had 2 candidates that came, and of course, hopefully we hope that more candidates will come in the other locations as well. But we really, we had like a round table. People got to ask them questions. And so that's the kind of personal type of messaging we want to do with candidates. At this point, when I say candidate messaging, I don't mean posters, I don't mean commercials. That's not what I mean quite yet. So that is kind of spring messaging. Yeah, I think I'll do LTEs and then I'll see if you guys have any questions about that. So I know a lot of you do LTEs and op-eds already, so that's awesome. But for those of you that don't, letters to the editor, or LTEs, are short form pieces. Depending on the publication, you get between 200 and 400 words. Definitely a place for concise thoughts. Op-eds are longer form. You can get a little narrative, and it's obviously you still want to have a concise thought, but you're able to give more details. So just a couple tips for these is to think small, which I know sounds like, wait, what? Shouldn't I be thinking big? In this case, if you think small as you're writing it, it's going to help you direct the reader's understanding of it. So if you define and simplify your one topic, before you start writing your LTE, write down one sentence, just a simple like subject, verb, simple sentence from like first grade, second grade, to keep you on track and just kind of have that above you. I always will put on a sticky note, like as I'm writing a press release or something, I put a sticky note on the corner of my computer. And now, after you have that, you can, add in some stuff and make your writing, pretty and whatnot. But at the end, this is something one of my journalism professors taught me in freshman year of college, was after someone read your piece, and you ask them to give you one sentence that summarized what they just read, would they say the same thing that you wrote on your Post-it note? And if they didn't, you didn't necessarily do it wrong, but kind of. But that is what the concise and simplified part is getting to. It doesn't mean you have to be talking about easy things and simple issues. It just means the way that you are going to guide the reader into thinking about it as well. So defining your community's concerns, the closer to home, the better. LTEs and op-eds are definitely more of a local community-wide type of initiative. I'm not sure that's the right word, but you're much more likely, and it's much more successful when you're published in a local or community paper because the people reading it know you and they know your name. Something that I think is really important to keep in mind, especially for a lot of us who live in maybe some red rural areas or something like that, that sometimes we feel very different from what like our neighbor or something might think. And I even find myself doing this. Sometimes you're writing for your community or like trying to show them what, like, hey, look, this is what Biden is doing. But remember that communities are defined by people in it, and everyone, like you are too, whether or not you are proud at the moment of your community or proud of something, you are also part of that. So trying to kind of write it in that particular manner is good too. Authoritative, avoiding passive verbs and extra words. The word that is like probably my biggest pet peeve. If you read through probably 80% of the sentences that have that, you can remove it and it wouldn't make no difference. But so yeah, be authoritative and define your community's concerns. there's the thing. So the MDP LTE program. So right now I have a list of, I think it's 14, and Steve, you are on it, of people who would be interested in either signing on as people for LTEs that are semi already written, or people who want to write the LTEs from scratch. So we've gotten, I believe it's 10 now, published since, the end of summer, fall-ish area. And a lot of them have been attacks on Trump or attacks on Schmidt or attacks on Parson. And obviously they're getting published, so it's working. But one of my goals for the spring messaging is to get stuff out there of what we're doing and not being reactive messaging with these LTEs, trying to use these more as in a proactive measure. And so I'm hoping to really honestly kind of revamp, completely change how we were doing kind of the LTE programs and interacting with you guys, because it just really wasn't working. And so if you guys are interested still, if you're on that list, let me know, or if you would like to be added. What I'm hoping to do is getting together, whether it's a Facebook group or some sort of little area that we can all go, and I can post, hey, we have this draft. Is anyone environmental focused? Do they want to take it? And Steve, you can write a, hey, yeah, I'll take it. I'll email you a draft after I add my stuff. So something like that. Because before it was just kind of via email and back and forth, and it was just, it wasn't efficient. And I don't think it was either, also wasn't using anyone's like skills to the, in the best way. So yeah, if you are interested in that, please send me an email. It's my first name, Bailey, Bailey, @MissouriDems.org. And also help me, kind of break it down. What topics are you interested in? Now, I've asked that so many times to people, and then they list like 17 topics. Like, I'm super, super glad that you guys are so into it, but telling me 2 or 3 of like, hey, I'm really big on environmental stuff, or the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, is one of my hugest passions. Like, okay, cool. So now I know those things about you and can kind of, instead of sending a potential LTE to 30 people, I can be like, hey, this would be really good coming from Diane's voice, something like that. So if you let me know things you're interested in, and then also if you have a, if you would want to be like a start from scratch writer, or kind of just a signer, both are totally fine. And then I believe this is, my last slide. Okay, so people don't like this slide normally. Are there any tricks to getting published? No. And if someone told you there is, they're lying. Every newspaper, every publication is different. And I have worked at multiple. I worked at the biggest one in Arizona, the USA Today. And I literally read through the LTEs and op-eds and would pass off a pile of them to editors. So there is no trick. Really, you're at the mercy of who's reading them, to be honest. But the thing to keep in mind is that editors, people reading through this, we want to and need to fill space. So I'm not a part of that anymore. They want to fill that space. And so how I think we should go into it, or how I have here the mindset, is give the editor no reason to not publish. And just taking from my experience sitting there, if I'm reading a quick 300-word piece from, so-and-so in Goodyear, Arizona, he's an angry man, and there's a sentence in there that I don't even read through the whole thing. I'm just like, oh God, that was like painful to read because it was, derogatory or something like that. And that automatically goes to the nose. Now, if I'm reading someone else's and there's not something horrible, it just goes into the maybe pile to give to the editors. So if you don't give me a reason to put you in the no pile, the chance of you going up and printed is pretty high actually. So yeah, I just don't fall into the idea that, you know, am I not doing this right? Is there a trick? Do I need to know somebody? Of course, that always helps. But I truly think that if you are concise, go by that sentence structure that I mentioned and have this mindset of don't give them a reason to not, that they can be very helpful. Threat, honestly, it's ourselves. From the moment I started here in Missouri, I think all of us know that, that the biggest threat to us is ourselves and how we work together as a team. And I truly, truly think that communications wise, once that's fixed, like it's golden. And so this is some video and visual tips. I don't know if you guys want me to go through this, Steve, or do you want to go to like just questions about the messaging?
Why don't we see if there are any questions?
Okay.
And I'd like to make a couple comments.
Yeah, here, I'm going to pause my share. There we go. Oh,
One is that MOPAG has a list of newspapers around the state that's under, I don't know, Ellen, I guess is under resources or take action. So that's a list that Ellen and I help keep current. I know there are other lists. And secondly, Bailey, I put your email in the chat. It's bailey@missouridems.org, correct?
yes. Yep. Yeah, all of ours are our first name and then at Missouri Dems, which is really helpful. Very easy to remember.
Okay. Ellen, go ahead.
Bailey, do you attend the Freedom Rising briefings?
I do, yes.
Okay. Because I think they're very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm trying to see if there are any other hands up.
I see Susan's.
Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, Bailey. I realize that you're new to Missouri, and I don't know how long you've been here, but I hope you're a fast learner because I was hoping to hear you talk more today about specific messaging strategies that we could use to overcome Republican messaging. Most of the people in this group are experienced letter to the editors, writers, and when we write a letter, we get published. We don't need to be coached about how to do that. We know how to do that. But it's what we need to say. And this group has also worked on coming up with talking points. But that's something that continually needs to be updated. We need punchier, effective language that we can use, not how to get published, because we know how to do that already. And I hope that you develop that kind of language strategy that we can then spread across the state. And we also need stuff that's specific to Missouri, not just what the president's or the national party's message is. We've got problems here locally. We'd like to get more Democrats elected to the legislature and statewide, again, if possible. So I hope you address those needs for us.
Yeah, first was brought here asked to talk about LTEs and all that. So that just to mention, it's not like I just come and say the same thing to everybody. That's what I was asked to discuss. And so messaging wise, specific messaging, yes. My first slide, sorry. My first slide just went over the topics themselves. Now, I don't think I'm still sharing my screen, am I? Where's the policy thing?
Video and visual tips is on right now.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys here quick policy folder I have So we'll go to the rural one. This is some of the stuff I pulled. And I pulled these on Thursdays when the White House got some good stuff up. But so this is their fact sheet on wealth in rural America, which is awesome. They normally don't break it down like that. And so I was able to go in and copy and paste some things that I think will be good for Missouri. So yes, I do have these things. The stuff specifically from the State of the Union. I mean, this is one fact sheet. So yes, I have those things. Not content here.
Bailey, if you need time to find it, we can go ahead with Ross or something if you need a little time to sort it out.
Oh, I mean, there's nothing to sort out.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just showing you guys how she said, you know, the specific messaging. It is here.
We're not seeing that on our screens. I'm still seeing video and visual tips.
I'm so confused. I'm sorry, you guys. Shift to select multiple windows. Oh, okay. Okay, you guys are going to see yourselves now. Okay, can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay, so here's a fact sheet. So this specific one, these came out on Thursday, and I was able to copy and paste some things that was specific to Missouri. And so yes, this information does exist. There are specific things in here. You guys all know about the child tax credit. But specifically things about 3,000 counties getting critical investments for lead pipes, for all sorts of things. So yes, these things are and will be messaged on. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys, my throat is not very happy right now. But yeah, so that was my purpose of showing you this. Wasn't necessarily anything to look for, but now that I know you guys couldn't see it, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, I'm gonna just stop sharing altogether.
Bailey, could you email that document to us so we could then send it out to our members? But it also sounds like a compilation of national issues rather than, again, things specific to Missouri. And I've talked to Michael Butler about this, and I know that that it's on his mind. We have things like corporate feeding operations, the big farms, and the way they impact Missouri counties, rural counties in this state. Issues like the legislature passing laws that prevent localities from passing. Again, I'm losing it, but passing laws to self-govern local areas, which affect both rural counties in regard to the CAFOs and cities, in regard to our gun restrictions or recycling or other issues that the Republicans have issues with. We need to discuss, or we need ways to discuss things that are more local, that will impact people in a meaningful way and get them thinking. A lot of people really don't pay attention to what's going on nationally. Locally is more important.
Along those lines, I would think that the Missouri legislature's attempts to restrict local school boards,
right,
and what they do, I mean, that's the same kind of thing.
Right.
That's going to have a lot of juice this election, apparently. And so I think we've got to have a good response to Republicans on the whole parents' rights thing, brouhaha.
Yes.
Health issues like the pandemic, for them to try to stop a city or a town from making their own decisions about what's best for their population regarding health and pandemic restrictions. That's unconscionable.
Yeah, the word hypocrisy comes to mind, and it's not a bad word to use. It's been used successfully against Jill Shoup and many Democrats. So I'm sorry, Susan, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay, Ellen?
Do you want to know when we get letters to the editor in the paper, or are you just keeping track of your certain
it would be
subjects?
great. Yeah, it'd be awesome if you let me know, because then it's something that I can specifically share as well.
Okay.
Yeah, no, when I say that we've gotten 10, that's specifically just like the ones that I've worked on with certain people. So yeah, no, I would assume, yeah, it's much more than 10 across the board of Democratic voices, of course, and thank goodness.
Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up was Medicaid expansion, because we're constantly fighting with our legislature to enact Medicaid expansion, and they're constantly trying to restrict and prevent it from being expanded. So that is a major issue for us.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to mention, Bailey, is the MDP doing or contemplating doing any marketing or any surveys of voters on issues?
I do not know. That would
Okay.
be something to ask Andy and Randy.
Okay.
We should. Right now, I am talking to NGP to try to figure out how to get polls into our emails. Yeah, I would ask Andy and Randy specifically about that. I almost like hate saying their two names together because I just
Okay.
feel silly. But I think they would be able to answer that better. I think we should, and I am trying to figure out ways to do that on our newsletter. So there are attempts in that direction.
Okay, before we go on to Ross, and thank you very much for coming today, Bailey, and I hope you can stick around because we're going to have some more discussion on this general area.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, Ross came across something, and he knows something about Missouri voters coming from the Springfield area himself, for where he grew up. Right, Ross?
Yes, that's right. And lived in Kansas City over 20 years and St. Louis over 11 years now. So all around the state. But my presentation is about rural voters. You want me to go ahead then, Steve?
Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
Do you want to take my screen? I've got a file, a Word file that I'm looking at, or I can just, I'm going to go through it quickly, but if you want to, I'm using the emboldened part of the a file in order to present on an article that was in Politico written by the county chair of Dunn County in rural Wisconsin.
Do you need to share the screen?
I don't have to. As long as you can see me, that's the bottom line.
Okay, we can see you.
Okay, great. This is from Politico, as I mentioned, and it was published a couple of years ago, just before the 2020 election. And the author, Bill Hogseth, talks about how rural people feel that they have been left out, that his county happens to be one that was a swing county. It used to go for Barack Obama, and then it went for Trump in the last two cycles. And as a result of Trump's election, there was an increase in participation in the Dunn County Democratic Party, but good organizing was not enough for them to win. 2/3 of the county voters cast their ballots for Trump. Why did Trump do so well? From Hogseth's point of view, it's not because the Democrats failed to organize. After many conversations with people in the county, Hogseth came to believe that it's because the National Party had not offered rural voters a clear vision that speaks to their lived experiences. The pain and struggle that were in that community were real, but they don't feel that it's something that the National Democrats are understanding. rural people want to share in prosperity, but the prosperity gap has widened as capital has flowed to metropolitan areas. Small town economies increasingly have become dominated by large corporations, low-wage retailers, or agribusiness firms that have no connection to the community dominate the economy. But the source of the wealth is in the things that they grow. Today, those things get shipped off into a vast global supply chain. Profits are siphoned off, little remains for the county residents. Farmers' share of retail food dollars has fallen from about 50% when I was born to about 15% today. Corporations control more and more of the agriculture business, and they're able to squeeze farmers because of their overwhelming oligopolistic market power. That's my phrase, not Hogseth, but that's the point he's making. There's also the digital divide, lack of high-speed internet for many rural people. Rural health care is a disaster. Hospitals are closing due to our profit-based model. Suicide rates are higher in the rural areas. And most of the rural counties in Wisconsin, he's talking about, lack a single practicing psychiatrist, and mental health issues are not being addressed. Hogseth says this is not an accident. It's the result of policy decisions by Republicans and Democrats that deplete rural communities. Rural voters appreciated Obama's repeated campaign promises to challenge the rise of agribusiness monopolies. But as president, he allowed continued consolidation of corporate power in the food system. His Department of Agriculture balked when it came time to enforce anti-monopoly rules such as those in the Packers and Stockyards Act. They failed to enforce country of origin labeling, which would have allowed independent farmers and ranchers to better compete within the consolidated meat industry. The Justice Department under Obama and the Federal Trade Commission presided over a series of corporate mergers that further consolidated power. This is a large part of why Trump won. And his supporters believed he was willing to stand up to elitist Democrats and fight for people like they were. Many rural people, as a result, have lost trust in the Democratic Party. It wasn't for a lack of effort, but there is what political scientist Catherine Kramer calls rural consciousness, through which the national political gestures are filtered through, a perception that cities are where decisions are made, culture happens there, but not in the rural areas. Resources flow there, and rural communities are left not in control of their own futures. Trust is earned slowly. A big step forward for Democrats would be to champion antitrust enforcement, to challenge the anti-competitive practices of the giant agribusiness firms, and to bring high-speed internet into the rural areas. Rural voters want a glimmer of hope that things will change. They want politicians who see a future for rural communities in which food production is localized, energy is cheap and clean. That's a problem area, but that's Hogseth speaking. People have good jobs, soil is healthy, Main Street is bustling, schools are vibrant, and everyone can see a doctor. All right, that's the basic summary of what he was saying. I don't think he addresses the whole issue of tribalism, which also is a massive problem, but I'm not trying to address that today. I want to separate that as a different issue. That's all I've got on that, and I'm open to questions and comments.
Okay, don't be shy, people. I don't know why I'm getting so much feedback here.
Yeah, let
Any
me get out of
comments?
the Word document. Yeah, that might be
Don?
causing a problem.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, so I grew up in rural America, and yeah, I mean, Ross, all these things are true. And in particular, grocery stores. There used to be 3 grocery stores, full service grocery stores in my hometown, plus neighborhood grocery stores. There are none today, none. They have to go 30 miles to a grocery store. Now with fuel prices going up, I mean, fuel is going to exacerbate all these issues. So there's a real crisis there. And unfortunately, I mean, there are solutions, but it's the investment in infrastructure and broadband and in particular, and in, I think alternative energy sources. But we have to reach out and with an engagement education effort to these rural communities so they know so they ask for things, because right now their reps are not asking for those types of solutions.
Do we know why Bailey's not doing this?
Susan, I'm going to ask Susan, go ahead.
Hi. It sounds to me like, from what this article says, and it validates other things that I've read, that what's happened to the Democratic Party, the development of more corporate-oriented Democrats, which began in the 1990s, is having the same impact with rural voters that it is with those of us in urban areas who are more progressive. And if you recall, when Bernie was running in 2016, many of those people that have ended up voting for Trump had supported Bernie over Hillary. So if we had candidates nationally and locally who were able to communicate with people on the same level that Bernie is, we would do better as a party.
Yeah, I think it was fascinating to me how well Bernie did in the primaries in 2016. That he was resonant across the state, and I didn't realize that there would be the understanding of I guess a left populist perspective that there is out there. I think that there is a sense that people are being crushed by the corporations, and that's very real in the agriculture economy, and it's something that has to be addressed in a policy framework and that is followed up with at the federal level.
Well, Ross, I think this is something that Lucas Kuntz, I mean, that's kind of the mantle he's taken on, right?
Yeah.
The dominance of the corporatocracy in both parties. And, maybe that's resonating in a Bernie kind of way with rural voters out there. You've got kind of a vicious circle going on now because now the Democrats do represent the metropolitan and large suburban areas. So they are less and less in touch with rural voters and rural voters' outlook and concerns. And so it's not easy to bring that perspective back into the Democratic Party, perhaps. Al, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, I was also going to mention about Lucas Kuntz and where Scott Sifton, I love him and he's a great guy, but man, Lucas is out there hammering this antitrust thing. And to me, that's almost a zero cost thing for Democrats to do. Now at the national level, who knows, they may depend on big contributions from corporate, Democrats. And so they don't want to do it. But at the state level, I know we're not dependent on these, corporate contributions. And so we just have to, I think it's a no cost thing for us to make that like our number one issue. Don.
So guess I go back to Dave Stewart and his big check to the conservative caucus. Okay. There's money flowing there, and call it corporate, call it whatever. It's not money being spent with the best interests of any of Missouri citizens in mind.
Right.
Does
Dave
anyone
Stewart's,
know?
Worldwide Technologies.
Right.
Haven't I read that there has been some discussion at the national level among Democrats primarily for antitrust legislation? Is anybody up on that? I've seen some noise on that from Elizabeth Warren or some others, but right, Diane, but I haven't heard anything more on, and that seems like it could be a winner, but yeah, can they actually do it?
But I think there's other infrastructure issues that aren't necessarily as onerous, or that again, broadband, solar energy gives these rural communities the ability to create that local economic critical mass that they've completely lost.
Aren't they getting
we
that
can't
from?
reverse a lot of what's going on from in the markets from a technological standpoint, but if we can give them the basic resources to work with, then they can rebuild.
Doesn't the infrastructure bill offer that money for that?
Oh,
Yeah, but I'd say now we're looking at solar too,
And that's going to
When?
segue, I think, into our next segment with our
Bridget.
representative today. Christina, go ahead.
Oh, I listen to Farmer Dave on 550. He has an hour show in the morning, and he kind of talks about the farming community. And he does say the farmers have, very limited places where they can go because the companies have been consolidated, and it's kind of like a monopoly in a way. And Biden did say something about that at one time, but then, like, what Steve said, I don't think anything's been done or passed or anything.
It doesn't seem to be part of the major discussions that you see going on.
But that would be a good discussion for the rural voters if the Democrats got something along that line to kind of break up the monotony, the monopolies that these food industry with the farmers.
Yeah, Missouri Independent has carried some stories on that about what a small percentage the farmers get, the ranchers get out of every dollar that's sold, and what Cargill and the rest of them take. Okay, so any other discussion on and we can return to this a bit later, but if there's no
One other comment.
Don, okay.
These rural communities have lost manufacturing jobs big time as well. So it's not just all agriculture. So just
True enough. Okay. Well, I'd like to turn it over now to Representative Bridget Walsh-Moore, and very glad that she could join us today. Normally we have Glenn Keenan to give us a legislative update, but I thought it'd be good to hear from a representative. And so, Bridget, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'll bring that down a little bit. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, I guess this is. Hi, thanks so much for having me. Quick, I'm just going to segue in there from the rural talk. The MDCC has a lot of great the Missouri House, the Democratic Caucus, the Victory Campaign, whatever it's called, I can't think of it right now, has some great rural talking points. We have a lot of great rural candidates this year that we're trying to get. Diane says, "Show us the baby." I will at the end. Otherwise, no one's going to listen to me. I have a 2-month-old son. So I went back into session just 3 weeks postpartum. That was less than desirable situation. But that is one of the things that I am pushing for. Tracy McCreary has pushed it in the House, and Jill Shoup has pushed it in the Senate. It is a family leave act that is paid. So it would be 6 weeks that the employees would all pay into. It would work kind of like unemployment. And it would give you 6 weeks of paid family leave. So whether that's you had a child, you adopted a child, you need to put your parents, help them transition into a nursing home, whatever. So that is one of the bills that I am working on. Highly doubt it will get a hearing. Highly doubt anything will move much of value. And I hate to be doom and gloom, but I'll never lie to you guys. As for what's kind of the hot topics right now, you all kind of jumped all over the place. With municipal elections coming up, we're going to see more and more discussion of, critical race theory and, controlling the narrative and parents' rights. And we've had a few of those bills in committee. Fortunately, it's most people know they're ridiculous. All you have to do is point out on the DESE website that everything that's in most of these, Parents' Bill of Rights are already in statute. They already exist. So it's ridiculous. And none of them have come to the floor yet, but I'm sure they will. The closer we get to April, the more heated this becomes. So we'll see more about that. So good news in legislation, education legislation is we have had some new legislation concerning IEPs, individualized education plans. If you're not familiar with those are for students with disabilities to allow them to make concessions or just alternative routes for them. Last year, we had a big win when we said you're now allowed to record your IEP meetings with the school. So you go in and you want to talk to the teachers, the school administration that's involved, you are now allowed to record those meetings. That happened last year. And this year, one of the big things we are pushing and has bipartisan support is the idea of if you needed to prove, so say there's a disagreement, you're saying that the school isn't doing enough for your IEP, or they're not giving your student all that's in their IEP, the burden to DESE, to the Department of Education, has now been switched. Instead, it currently, I as a parent would have to prove that the school is not doing enough for my child, whereas we are trying to switch it so that the school will have to show how much they are doing for my child. So the burden of proof is switching to the school administration, which is great because I, as a parent, I'm not in the classroom all day, every day. I'm going off the word of my child, but I can see their grades, I can see they're struggling, and it's really hard to prove a negative, as we all know. So we are excited that we can move this on to the school administration. As much as I hate to put another burden on school teachers, if they're doing the IEP, if they are, following the plan accordingly, it shouldn't be that much extra work. And you should, if you say you are doing what we agreed upon, you're following the plans, you're allowing the alternatives for my child, it should be real easy for you to prove that. So that is something that I'm really excited about. Hopefully moving forward, that will pass. I don't believe that's had a committee hearing yet, but it has had a lot of chatter. A lot of people are in favor for it. So hopefully it'll get assigned to a committee soon. Bills that have been heard on education are yikes. Mary Elizabeth Coleman had one that said all history lessons in which must present America in a positive light. Yeah, exactly. I was like, cool. So the Trail of Tears with a positive spin, Japanese internment of our own citizens with a happy ending. Sure, yeah. Luckily, we do have a few members on the other side in those meetings who were like, that is a bridge too far. And one of those was we were fortunate Adam Schwadron of St. Charles pushed very hard for a bill to make sure that Holocaust education remained. He is our only Jewish member that I'm aware of. And he made sure that Holocaust education would remain as part of the curriculum because that is also critical race theory. So he said, if we're going to take away that, are you going to take away Holocaust education? And so that was a support that we did not see coming. So that is very exciting. Of course, those leading the campaign, Nick Schroer, Brian Seitz. Luckily, no one takes Seitz seriously. He's just gone rogue and he's not liked within the party. He's not respected, but he does have a mouthpiece. So, he gets to go up to the microphone and say whatever nonsense he wants. And we all have to deal with the consequences. I know you touched on Medicaid expansion a bit. They're fighting us tooth and nail for the second year in a row. Right now, the big thing is they want to put work requirements on it, which is against the federal mandate. If the state was to put work requirements on it, that would go against the federal regulations. So hopefully we can squash that argument, but it's not going well. So I'm trying to, sorry, Steve, you sent me a list.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
What would be the impact then if they were to put those work requirements on?
It would drag it out because it would automatically go to court. It would be a whole thing. I don't know that it would delay implementation, but more than likely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it would automatically get held up in court. And would that delay the rollout? I'm not sure on what exactly would happen, but it would go immediately to court. And we're prepared to do that, but we're hoping to avoid that for obvious reasons.
All right, thank you.
The thing is, what I understand with that effort to get a work requirement put on it, voters would have to pass it. And so it would mean in November, we would be fighting to defeat that resolution with the voters. Right?
I think that was a concession they put in there. I think that was something because it is with Medicaid expansion. I think it would have to go to a vote with the voters. We don't even want it to get that far. I don't even want it.
I know that, but I mean, that's what it would mean. We would have to expend money and energy to defeat it at the polls, and we would have a shot at that.
Yeah. And yeah, they would, and again, if it were to pass after we spent all this time and money and work requirements made it on, it would then go into courts because it's against the federal mandate. So hoping to avoid that. Good news, bad news, nothing's moving through the Senate. So, we hate to say we always pass the trash to the Senate and it gets held up there. So nothing actually comes of it, but you try to minimize that as much as possible. And let me see, one of the big things that we can just keep hammering on, because it is, I know, Susan, you said a local issue that's sexy, universal, grabs attention, is the Make Murder Legal Act. About 3 weeks ago, we heard Senate bill appropriately numbered 666. You gotta love it when life gives you those little joys. Basically, we started calling it the Make Murder Legal Act. What this would do is it would say that anytime that there was a murder, someone has taken the life of another individual, that the person who committed the act was basically presumed innocent. You just assume self-defense, and the burden of proof would be on the prosecutor to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this was not self-defense. So this would also prohibit suspects from being arrested, detained, or charged with a crime unless you could prove that this murder was a crime. That is House Bill 2118. That is coming up this week. Let me see let me check my notes, that's going to be. Okay, it doesn't say what committee it's going to be in. I will find that out. I imagine it won't go to criminal justice, obviously. It'll go to what is it? Emerging issues, kind of the catch-all committee that the speaker made for his pet projects. It'll go to the emerging issues, but that's basically what it is. The so-called stand your ground laws. All police authorities have come out against it. Prosecutors have come out against it. Missouri defense attorneys have come out against it. It's really hard to find anyone who's for it other than the NRA. But it's another talking point of who is pushing this, why. If you were to look at, I'm going to say his name wrong, but the gentleman who murdered Ahmed Abri, who trucked him down, shot him dead in the street, they would be presumed innocent under this law. And we would have to prove that they were not acting in self-defense. And so they would still be walking free. And until we do that, we could not arrest them. We could not detain them. They couldn't be charged with a crime until we could prove that what happened to that poor man was not self-defense. So it would be on us to prove that it wasn't. And that's huge. And you can just keep hammering that. The Make Murder Legal Act, House Bill 2118. And that's going into rural voting. We are at, as I said, we have a lot of rural candidates, which is great, but we actually have a lot of people in the House currently, myself included, who are really trying to push our rural agenda. I represent South St. Louis City and County, so people don't really look at me like that, but my family owns a farm in Iowa. We are soybean farmers. We have had cattle in the past, historically. I am familiar with all of that. And I'm able to talk the talk and walk the walk. And I've been meeting with the soybeans farmers, the Soybean Association, the Cattlemen's Association, all of those things, these typically rural groups who just walk right past the Dems when they see them. And even better, aside from me, is Emily Weber. She's a freshman like myself. She's from the Kansas City area. She represents downtown, like the heart of Kansas City, but she grew up on a farm. She's a farm girl. She grew up, she can hand milk a cow. She can, she showed sheep. She has her 4-H stuff. She's a farm girl through and through. And so she's been one of our secret weapons. She is currently the ranking member on agriculture. And she is bringing in some great change because she shows up and, people often just dismiss the Democrats as, well, you city slickers, you don't even know what we're talking about. And we're able to at least have the conversations now in the House. So we are working on changing that. And she and I have been talking, she'll probably be uncontested in her election this year, more than likely. And anyone who has an easier seat to hold any incumbent, we are going to try and fan out over the summer into the rural areas to spread our message. That is part of our intent. I think we need, messaging is great. I mean, we're going up against Fox News and, 40 years of Fox News and Rush Limbaugh. That's what we're up against without a really strong Democratic voice on the airwaves anywhere. So we're going down and we're gonna just visit all summer and, have boots on the ground to try and do what we can, and to help where there is a Democratic candidate, we will be there to back her up. I say she because it's mostly women, of course. So is there anything that's going on that you would like more information on, or Diane, I see your questions. Anyone running against you? Not at the moment, but they will. Because of redistricting, they can pull anyone from anywhere, and they have a year to move there. So I could get an opponent from the boot heel. And I haven't seen a candidate for the 94th. I know we were in discussion with someone earlier this, or maybe last year, I guess.
Not Matt Farwig.
I haven't met anyone. I haven't seen, no one has
Okay.
filed.
No, I've heard a different name now because I know Matt won't run, but okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
just curious.
So are there any other questions? Anything I didn't go over? I mean, I could talk for
Well,
hours.
I'd like to know.
Give me
ahead, Susan.
parameters. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Susan.
Diane had a question and she already had the
Oh,
floor, so
okay.
why doesn't she ask hers first?
All right, Diane.
Oh, I was just wondering what you hear from the rural groups that you meet with.
But we haven't really started. I haven't started yet.
Oh.
So I'm not too sure. I know Jess Piper's putting in the work. We have a few, what's her name? Christine, I'm gonna get it wrong, is in down in like Potosi area in Franklin County. She's putting in the work. We have a few, it's a handful, and they probably won't win this cycle. And they understand that. But, we're getting the word out there, and, maybe 2024, we'll get some more turnout. We'll get the word out there. So I am glad that we have candidates that understand it. We'd love them to, and we're going to, that is our goal, is to flip the seat this year, but knowing in the back of our minds that that's probably not going to happen, and they're going to need to run 2 or 3 times. And luckily they are aware of that. So I'm saying, let's at least put a D on the ballot, let's at least make it a choice. Let's at least, somewhat make them work for it. So, yeah. And I'm sorry, Susan, you had a question?
Yeah, there were the 2 education bills, the anti-CRT and then the Parents' Bill of Rights, which I believe one was 1995 and one was 1474, I think. My memory for numbers isn't that good.
I don't know any of the numbers of my own bills, so I'll be honest. So
okay, I thought they were combined a week ago into a House committee substitute, and it looked like they were going to become the education omnibus, but they still have their individual numbers. Do you know what the combined number might be?
Usually the House committee substitute, it becomes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. The combined number, usually it has both numbers in there so you can track it. So we just had one on the floor. So yeah, it doesn't get a whole new number. It just says and then that will probably be the omnibus education bill is what we're assuming.
Right. So if I type in either number, I'll get the whole thing.
Yes, you should.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Ross?
Yes, I wanted to ask about a bill. I've got a file. Let me go over and see if I can look at this. I work as a volunteer with the Sierra Club, and we're opposing House Bill 2426 that harms the hazardous waste oversight program. The bill would add a provision to the hazardous waste law that means we can't do anything stricter than a federal law, and would effectively end the brownfields voluntary cleanup program, which means the program and its staff would no longer be in operation. The state would not seek the $1 million annual grant from EPA to operate it. Site cleanups would no longer be supervised, and it would change the hazardous waste generator provisions and cost Department of Natural Resources about $500,000 annually. Have you heard about this bill?
I've heard talk about it. It has not come through. I sit on Conservation Committee. It has not come through there, and I have not seen it noticed up. So it's not super on my radar, fortunately. But it should come through Conservation, but the speaker is getting tricky this year. He might put it through, that Emergent Issues Committee I talked about, and a few others. He might get creative with his committee assignments as he is this year. I also sit on Homeland Security, and we heard a bill about the residency requirement for firefighters in Kansas City. That's a local government issue. That should go through the local government committee, but he assigned it to Homeland Security. So he's getting tricky with the committee assignments, those bills that he is assigning to committee. Right now, only 5 Democratic bills have been assigned to committee, so he's making it very clear that we're not getting anything done this year. So we're pretty much on full defense mode. So no, sorry, to answer your question, I'm aware of it. I've heard of it. It's not moving much, which is good.
It's part of a whole pattern of attacks on the DNR and the attempt to reduce its power to do its job in the state by legislative action by the Missouri State Legislature.
Right. Yeah, we heard Chris Dinkins' bill on, she wants to change how the Department of Natural Resources is made up, the conservation, how the Department of Conservation is made up. We heard that in conservation. She didn't get the votes she wanted, so she went to the speaker. Now it's been reassigned to Ways and Means. There were more like-minded people in Ways and Means, so it has passed that committee. So it could make its way onto the floor.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a question that Bridget just touched on, which is over the years, it looks like the speakers have gained more and more power for control of the bills, what gets considered, and it seems to be getting worse.
Yes.
And I wonder if there's any appetite for the representatives to start representing their people, in the sense of, do they have any means available to them to roll back the power of the speakers? And I'm sure this is a very naive question, but can you explain why that can't be done?
Sure, happily. We had a prime example of this last year. So I don't know how things have worked, historically with the power of the speaker. If the speaker just wouldn't dare do that in the name of parity, in the name of, I don't know how. I do know that the speaker does have to assign things to committee. And
there are very few bills that really get a hearing out of all the bills that are proposed, right? So there's a racking and stacking by the speaker and his staff, I guess, or a few of the people in the in group.
There's very few. Well,
right, that you actually end up with any kind of action, forward action.
We file over 2,000 bills each year, and there's only about a couple hundred that even make it to committee, even fewer that make it, that pass committee. First of all, some die in committee, and then they make it to the floor, because you can pass committee. I had a bill pass committee last year. I was very excited, and it never saw the light of day on the floor. So it does go back to their control, the supermajority, which luckily they're no longer the supermajority, just the majority. They're people resigning in disgrace has actually worked out for us. So we are hoping. So to your question, prime example of last year. And this, sorry if I get emotional, this one really upsets me. We had, every year we file MONA, if you're familiar with that, basically to allow same-sex marriages. Basically, your employer cannot discriminate against you based on your sexual orientation and a whole host of other things that still has not passed in Missouri. So we, every year we file it. Every year it's ignored. A couple years it gets a committee hearing. Some years it does, some years it doesn't. It has never left the House. So last year, Representative Hannigan, a friend of mine, he filed it, a Republican, an outed gay man, an openly gay man. He filed it and it wasn't going anywhere, He had petitioned the speaker had offered it for consideration to the Children and Families Committee, knowing full well that that's an uber conservative committee. Again, why would an employment law go to children and education? Because that's where he wanted it. And even so, the chairperson of the committee at the time, Mary Elizabeth Coleman, refused to hear it. She still, as the chairperson, has the ability to do that or to assign it, and then we just don't get to it, doesn't quite make it on the schedule and we run out of time. When we figured out that that's what she was doing, we did have the ability to sign a petition. I forget the number of members we need, but it was basically, we had to have to take the bill, bypass, it goes straight to a floor read. Means it bypasses everything and goes straight to the floor. And to get the members to do that, it had to be the entire Democratic caucus and a handful of Republicans. We had to get about 15 or 16 Republicans to reach our number. And we did. We were able to do that. So your MOPAG, Mona was heard on the floor. Great day for everyone. Very exciting. We were severely punished. We had upset the speaker. We had gotten too big for our britches. And that was when the awful anti-trans children's sports bill was allowed to go through committee and then was heard on the floor. And some vile, disgusting, hate-filled conversations took place on the floor that we had previously been promised that bill would not see the floor. We had an understanding with the speaker that we would not be put through that the children of Missouri would not be put through that. But that was our punishment for filing the petition and bringing Mona to the floor. It was that bill, also Rush Limbaugh Day, which we had told would never see the light of day. That was also brought to the floor. The speaker proved his point. We were severely and brutally punished. It was a very rough.
Can February 30th be Rush Limbaugh Day?
Yeah, exactly. My thing is,
So Bridget, I have the question I guess I have, trying to get to the heart of the matter, is these procedures, these various procedures in terms of assignments and so forth. I mean, there must be some of this that's subject to majority vote or not.
The rules we agree to at the beginning of some are state statute, some are just House rules. They're just that. We agree to the rules. We can make up whatever rules we want every session. But again, it would require the majority, and that would mean going against the speaker to limit the powers of the speaker. We have done that a few times. We have offered that on the floor. We did last year, we did this year. But as you say, you need a majority vote. And
so you're not able to partner with enough. Well, it would be, I guess, enough Republicans to create a majority.
Right.
So,
until we get more blue on the floor, we are dead in the water.
Well, it also hurts Republicans too. A number of
it does. They are not pleased. A lot of them break with the speaker. They've gotten too big, that they have a lot of infighting. It hurts them. And, the speaker picks favorites and there's a lot of infighting there, which is to our benefit, but not to the benefit of the state of Missouri by any means.
Right.
So.
Okay. Susan?
I just wanted to say that you offered a perspective that you were punished for what you did last year with Mona.
Mhm.
And I would like to say to you that you showed your colors, and you have a lot to be proud of for showing your colors. That they chose to show theirs in reverse is not a matter of punishing you. It's simply a matter of showing who they are
Right.
um, in opposition to you. And that's not necessarily, painful as it may be to deal with, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So
No, I mean, it showed
I-
who they were, and we got some great sound bites out of it. The representative who compared trans children to pedophiles and said that they were sexual assailants. That was
I don't think you have any reason to feel bad about what you did or feel like you were bad children who were being punished. You stood up for what you believe in, and they reacted the way they react.
right.
And
No, well, thank you. Yeah, I
themselves to
mean,
be
maybe
what they are.
punishment
And
isn't the right word, but
Yeah,
that was definitely
I-
his motive. We did that. We showed, hey, this is important to enough of us that we're not going to let you silence it. And that was what the true kicker, and what makes this so horrific, was such a terrible emotional week on the floor, because that just drug out everything. We heard the CRT and we listened to their drivel, and in the end of it, it was just, it was so emotionally scarring. And then unfortunately in August, Representative Hannigan passed. And that was so disheartening on its own. This was his charge. He wanted this so badly, and then he passed. And then they had the audacity to release a statement saying, how much they're going to miss him and how he was a champion of this cause. It was so disrespectful. And so just to say, oh, as you know, he moved homosexual rights. It was so upsetting.
It was hypocritical.
It was
That's
terrible.
Hypocritical is the word. But what I'm saying to you is, please don't hesitate to use that tactic again to bring a bill to the floor just because they're going to behave like what they are and who they are in reaction to it. You've still got to be the fighters that you are for what's right and not consider the consequences.
Right. I will say that's always something we have in our back pocket. I don't know that we'll get the Republican support this time, because that was only our public flogging. I know that the Republicans who did sign on, their bills were not heard again. They suffered. They lost the support of the party. So it will be hard to get the Republicans we need for that to happen again. I mean, I'm not saying we won't try again, but it will be that much more uphill because the speaker is expecting it. I mean, we were able to totally blindside him last time, and that was great. It was a rule on the books forever, and it was never, it was very rarely used. I think we were only like the fourth or fifth time that rule had ever been utilized, that method had ever been utilized. So he didn't see it coming, completely blindsided it. We have lost the element of surprise, and we've lost probably, I'm assuming, a lot of Republicans that were willing to challenge the speaker in that way. However, there are a bit of seniors this year who aren't running, they're termed out. So this is their last hurrah. If we can get a hold of them and they don't care, they want to flip the bird to the speaker because they're on their way out anyway. So, but yeah, it's something we're considering, but we'll have to do it a little differently this time.
Bridget, can you tell us about what's happening with expansion of gambling?
Yes, I wish Wes Rogers was here. That's his pet project. So basically, the sports betting, basically make sports betting legal in Missouri is what they would like. We can already cross the river. You can go to the horse races at Fairmont, and it's totally, it's a good time. I've done it. It's great. There's been an expressed desire for it in Missouri. It happens anyway off the books in Missouri. So that's just tax revenue we're missing out on.
Isn't there an expansion of slot machines as well, though?
The expansion of slot machines, yeah, that's also being tacked on to sports betting. And, I represent River City Casino. Obviously, they're against it. And I'd have to say that I'm against the slot machines just because if you have a gambling addiction or anything, it's right there. It's everywhere.
That's the right answer.
You walk into a gas station, boom, it's right there. I mean, and they're all illegal, and
These machines are very addictive for many
I'm in
people,
South
and
County.
they will cause much damage.
I go to the grocery store. I go to the Bosnian grocery store. I love Garner's Market right here. And there are 7 slot machines just in the middle of the grocery store. And there are these old men who smoke in the middle of the grocery store. They don't.
There's a book called Irresistible that talks about various addictions, the rise of addictive technology and the business of keeping us hooked. And gambling is among that, and the slot machines and how they are, there's a whole science behind addicting people.
There is, yeah.
And it's been employed and refined over the last, umpteen years.
Yeah.
So I think it's well, yes, he talks a great deal, Diane, about phone technology as well as
I'm
various
completely
games
guilty. I'm
like,
completely guilty myself. I am
too.
100%
Oh,
addicted
okay.
to my phone.
Keep you scrolling. Yeah.
And the science
his
behind it.
name
We
is
know the science
Adam
is there.
Alter, by the way, Adam Alter. I found it
Adam
very
Alter.
very interesting read. Do you think that will pass then?
It has a lot of support. We're trying to split it up to make sports betting and the slot machines 2 separate things because they really are. That's 2 separate. So if I would probably be in support of sports betting. I'd have to look at the particulars of where the money goes and what's behind it. But generally, I'm okay with it because it happens anyway. We might as well get the tax money. That's our first step is sports betting. And the leader of the pack in sports betting is Wes Rogers. If you have, he's
okay.
He loves it. If you have any questions about, he knows it inside out and outside. He's an attorney, and this is his. He wants to be able to gamble. He wants to be able to bet on the Royals. That's basically
Okay.
it.
There is Jobs with Justice just put out an email concerning their fight against House Bill 1552. They call it a bill that allows schools to seek public funding without accountability or transparency.
Basically, the charter, the Kairos charter bill. Yeah.
Okay.
That has, unfortunately, we have split the Democratic caucus on that. Some of the St. Louis city reps are in favor of charter schools because they look at the St. Louis public schools, they say, we've given you chance after chance, and it's just not working, and they just don't know what to say to parents who, I struggle with it too, like, oh, well, St. Louis public schools, we're working on it. Well, that's great. My kid's in school now, it gets better in 5 years. That's 5 years of my child getting a not so great education. I don't care. I'm going to send them to the charter school. And it's really hard to argue against. It is. It's really hard.
It's really easy because the charter schools are doing worse and parents don't know that.
Parents
but the
don't
thing
know
is,
that.
The bill, I understand that bill was sort of put on the informal calendar for the House, but there's a Senate version 869 that was put on the formal calendar, and that form of the bill may come up or may have come up this week. Do you know?
I didn't hear anything about that on the Senate side.
Okay.
I didn't hear that come up. They may have taken it up briefly and set it aside. They do that sometimes.
What's the difference between being on the informal calendar and the formal calendar?
That's a good question. So the formal calendar is basically, we agreed we're going to talk about this on this day, and it's there, and it's ready to go. The informal calendar can be taken up at any time. So once it hits the informal calendar, they can just be like, you know what? The Democrats are ticking us off today. Let's pick one of these. Guess what? We're going to talk about X. And so we're totally thrown off. We don't have our arguments prepared. We don't, but it's on the informal calendar, so it's fair game. So
So
that's
both
kind of
bills could move at any time.
those bills
Um,
could move at anything on the informal calendar if it's sat for a day. It can from being moved there, so it moves to the informal calendar. It has to sit for a day. Basically, that's like giving notice. It has to sit for a business day, or a day of session, I should say, not really a business day, but it has to sit for a day of session. And then the next day, the next session, it's fair game.
You should know that those few city reps that support that bill have upset the St. Louis Public Schools parents in their districts, and they're getting a lot of flack
They're
for
aware.
it. That bill
They're
would
aware.
take 20 million. That bill would redistribute $20 million from St. Louis Public Schools to charter schools, and there are more white children in the charter schools, and so it would disproportionately defund schools that are overwhelmingly African American and advantaged schools that are more white. It's a horrible
Correct.
bill.
It's a horrible bill. And the St. Louis, I won't speak for them because I don't know their thoughts. I don't know. But in Kansas City, I know they are in an extremely hard spot because their numbers have flipped. They now, in the city of Kansas City, they now have more students in charter schools than they do in the public school. So it's a lot harder for them to vote against charter schools when the majority of their constituents have children in charter schools. I mean, you have to vote your conscience, but you also have to vote your constituents, and this is what their constituents want.
And this
So
is
Kansas
what we're
City,
trying to prevent happening in the city here.
right? So that's what we're trying to do. Last year, when the charter school funding came up, it was telling, and that's why we got a roll call vote. Fortunately, the rural districts, basically anyone outside the major cities, not even, rural, anyone outside the major cities didn't want this. They're terrified that charter schools are going to come in and take their schools. So we did have an amendment added on that said this will only affect St. Louis and Kansas City public schools. And we have that roll call vote of the rural representatives who said, I don't want it in my district. Oh, but you guys can have it, that's fine. So that's something we've been using to our advantage, in that they know it's bad, they just don't care because it's not affecting their schools. And that goes back to this whole statewide argument. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm 100% against charter schools. My mom worked at Imagine Academy. That's really all I need to say. The argument for them, though, they're getting their branding is amazing. The charter schools, their branding, their messaging, it's compelling, it's good, it's very good. And they had a bunch of the students come up and they handed out pamphlets themselves, and my school doesn't get as much money as other schools, so we just want to make sure that it's fair. Well, when you have an 8-year-old telling you that, they're good. That's all I'm gonna say is it's good messaging, it's good. And unless, like to Susan's point, unless you're gonna really dig down into the nitty-gritty, which most voters don't do, it's a tough sell.
The thing
Yeah,
is that the charter schools are not a party to the desegregation settlement agreement, and the St. Louis Public Schools are. And that settlement agreement in 1999 stipulated that the St. Louis Public Schools had to maintain certain deseg programs, and they also set aside sales tax money to pay for those programs, which the charters subsequently sued to get a part of, even though they are not a party to that settlement and don't have those programs. So St. Louis Public Schools still has to pay for those programs without, it's an unfunded mandate. And for the charters continually to say, well, we're not being funded equally, when they are also not providing programs that that the public schools are required to, is an equity issue. And that's one of the reasons why this bill is so insidious.
Correct. And also, like, getting back to my point on IEPs, charter schools do not have to, they're not legally obligated to honor them, they're not held to the same standard. So that's what we're hoping to kill it. But this is the speaker's pet project, just like vouchers were. He loves charter schools. He loves, he was dyslexic as a child, was neglected, was not able to succeed in school until much later into his adult life. And his idea of rectifying that is charter schools and vouchers and just, an education free for all. That is him correcting his childhood in his mind, just to understand where this is coming from in his perspective. Very sad childhood. He was, in the foster care system, was undiagnosed dyslexic, just thought he was stupid for years and years and years. Thankfully got the help he needed, was able to go to college as an adult. But the damage was done, so this is personal for him. It's personal, it's real. It's a very hard argument against him because this is so core to who he is and his values. So
Bridget, I'd like to bring up something. I'd like to throw it out for you and for any others who want to comment on it. And I could be wrong about this, but this is what I see. And it's that the Missouri Democratic Party, in their messaging, in their communications, in their outlook, and the Democratic representatives and senators, they don't seem to come together on that messaging, on that communication, on the priorities. Maybe I'm not understanding things right, but it does not seem to me that the issues necessarily that the Democrats are working on and the issues as they deal with them on the House floor and the Senate are translated over to the MDP and the MDP messaging. I don't know if you see it or others see it like that, or am I misconstruing the situation? I don't know.
I will say most of what especially when we're in session, what happens, our messaging on the House, my social media, it's very reactive to what's actively happening on the floor. And the MDP does try to keep it a little bit more higher level, not immediately, well, this happened today, and immediately respond to it. They are trying to be more consistent, more overarching, as that is their goal as the state Democratic Party. They do try to stick to a bit more national ideas. They do try to stick to being a branch for the national government and a bit more overarching and consistent, whereas we are, like I said, especially during session, we're much more reactive. We're much more, this happened today, we're on top of it. And I think that might be what you're seeing.
Well, for example, in the drafting of I can't remember the name of it, not the MDP agenda, but the platform, their platform, I don't know, are representatives involved in that process at all, or how does that?
Not all of us individually, representative, our caucus leader Quaid and a few members of leadership are involved in those conversations.
I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable that the issues that representatives are dealing with are really getting translated and broadcast out there by the MDP. That's just my feeling about it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments by folks? All right. Well, thank you very much, Bridget, for coming today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. Really appreciate it. And yes, thanks. Thanks for keeping up the fight.
No.
I'm sure it's been a real eye opener for you.
It's more like shouting into the abyss. I feel like, a toddler going up to like when your kid's mad at you and they just start punching at your leg and you're like, oh no, like that's kind of what I feel like. But everyone's like, oh, keep up the fight. I'm like, okay. But thank you. We appreciate the encouragement.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming today. Before we close out, I just wanted to mention we have our next MOPAG meeting is on April the 2nd, and Rita Hurd Days is planning on attending, and I think Ben Samuels may come as well. He's been invited. So that's our next MOPAG meeting. And I also wanted to go back briefly to the election coming up, the municipal elections on April 5th. April 4th is the last day to vote absentee in person at the election board office in St. Anne. And of course, you can go to the St. Louis County Board of Elections sample ballot lookup to see what issues are going to be on your ballot, unless you're in the St. Louis city, of course. St. Louis County has 4 propositions, and I wasn't planning on going through them today. I just mentioned them quickly. The first one, first of all, has anybody taken a look at those propositions? Well, the first one deals with county employee hiring and compensation. The Proposition B says that the county executive will have no outside employment work, no contractor work. And if they have that, if they violate the rules, then basically their job will be taken away from them. The office will be declared vacant. Proposition C is that there should be a local use tax at the same rate as the total local sales tax rate. And I have no idea what that means. And then the last proposition is, and Susan, are you still with us? She had to leave. Should St. Louis County enter into a lease agreement with Raintree Foundation for a building and grounds for the operation of a pre-primary and primary grade school? Raintree has a school on South Mason, close to Queenie Park. I'm wondering if they want to take over that dog museum that was there at Queenie Park.
The dog museum sits empty, and Raintree wants to lease it from the county.
That's what I figured. So
that's it.
So anyway, those are the 4, and we can take a closer look at those next month and make some recommendations.
Yes.
So yeah, take a look at those, folks, and see what you think.
Is the next meeting April 1st?
The next meeting is April the 2nd.
2nd. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
April
So
2nd.
before the election, that's good. We get last minute.
Yeah, right before that election.
Yeah.
Okay. Al, if you would stay on for 1 minute after we wrap up.
We'll do.
Anything else before we shut it down?